All right, I think we are live in here. Welcome to this webinar that we're going to talk about some mobile device stuff, kind of walk through building a story out of your evidence. That's what we want to do. We want to deliver it in kind of a meaningful way that shows what's happening chronologically or however you need to deliver that story. I am Justin Tolman. I am the forensic subject matter expert at Xtero. I have been with Xtero for a while. My background before Xtero and Access Data was law enforcement. So understand a little bit about why we do that. So let's jump in here, share my screen. I'm going to share my whole screen just because we'll be doing a little bit of jumping around. Let me hide this. So what story is your mobile device evidence telling? So we're going to focus on three main aspects of these types of investigations. Reviewing the individual, not the app. And we'll talk about that in a second. iOS Biome is the Tolkien of the story. Here's the thing, like Tolkien, obviously great, Lord of the Rings. Sometimes you just like get bogged down and like he just described like how the trees were and the grass and all this sort of stuff. And it like really brings Lord of the Rings alive, of course, makes it cool. And so like when you think about biome data on iOS and like Knowledge C, which was kind of the precursor, well, it's still around, but it was like really held a lot of the data in the precursor for what eventually went into a lot of the biomes. It really adds kind of that depth and that kind of connective tissue. It's kind of related to or kind of analogous to system summary information off of computers, that sort of thing. So we'll look at some of that, quite a bit of that, and talk about what type of information you can get out of there and how it can help build the story if you need to go into depth of what somebody has been doing or the system has been doing, those types of things, and some nuggets that you can get out of that. And then lastly, if you need to work with privileged information or if you have information that out of chats that you don't want to report on or you don't want other people to review. So a lot of times you may have information dealing with a case, but you need somebody else to review it. Like you've seized information from an attorney or from, it could be clergy or any protected kind of vertical. And so you need, or health, it would be another thing. So you would have a team that goes in, grabs this information off of a phone or whatever, and you need to be able to say, okay, I need you to read this conversation, but there's key things in here that they talk about that you shouldn't read, right? And so you can have one user cleared out and another user review it. And so we'll take a look at that. As we go through this, we'll be using FTK because that's what I have access to. So that's what we are going to see in the background here as we talk about these three things. So first of all, investigating the individual. I don't know about you guys, but I have multiple chat applications on my phone. And even within those chat applications, I have people that appear in both, right? I have family and friends that are like, I use, I'm an Android person, so I use Hangouts quite a bit for work and for personal. So I have them in there. But then I also have SMS messages that I use to talk to the same people if I'm going to like DM, because at the time, I know RCS is becoming better now and Apple's finally coming on board now. But things like Hangouts were better for group chatting and stuff like that. So split apps. But you may also have WhatsApp to where, okay, hey, especially if you have friends in international locations and that sort of thing, WhatsApp can help you communicate with them, avoiding the cell network and all that sort of stuff. And you kind of get this best of both worlds where it's over digital, but it uses their phone number, make calls, all this sort of thing. So you have these people, these common contacts where information is spread between multiple apps. So focusing on the app when we analyze, it's not bad by any means, but is it the best way that we can approach it? So one of the things that we would want to do as we approach investigating communication records is combine those communication records by individual rather than by just analyzing the app. Okay. And we'll kind of go through, so like you can see here that in this case, Isaac, the top row here, Isaac is the owner of the phone. So of course they're going to be kind of tied to a bunch of these apps, all of them. That's how it be. But they've talked to this Elliot Alderson in various ways. Okay, whether it's SMS, whether it's a call, whether it's this Kick or this talk app, etc. All right, there's multiple different avenues that they have contacted them. Also notice that this Elliot contact has had multiple numbers over a period of time. And so we, the system recognizes that as a different number, the phone, maybe your forensic software, whatever, but we know as an investigator that it's the same thing. Now, in this case, we just know, but through investigative means, we know that all these Elliots are the same person. And that's one of the things that we don't want to forget is that don't get so buried into the digital that you're forgetting all this other information outside of it. So we want to combine these and look at these as one Elliot Alderson as we approach our investigation. Okay. And by doing that, again, we kind of get a timeline or a look at all the communication between one individual. And that's really what we're going for, right? Is we want to combine this in so that I want to know, hey, I've talked to Megan. Megan's talking to me. What is the flow there from between those two people? Quite a spread of locations. Just I had to move the chat out. I'm in Washington State, so looks like not many over here on the west side, but yeah. So cool. Combine them into an individual because that's really what we care about, right? We care about the communication between the individuals. Oh, since I deselected my slide deck. So when we look at this individual, we can see the interactions. Let me go one more and spread that out. We can see the interactions between them and the different stuff that they've been using to communicate. See up here, we have 2 contacts within this app and 2 within the iOS and call. This is their contact information here in the address book. So AB person is a table within the address book SQLite database and an iOS database, at least at this time that the evidence was captured. And we have their email that was stored in there as well. Then we have Kick, we had WhatsApp, like we said, and then we had Talk up here, okay? And so we can kind of get an idea of how this person is communicating with this individual, okay? Whether it's based on phone number, email, call history, chat, of course. We don't really care. We just care about the communication. So we can select them. And then when we look at the data now in your interface, we just have, you can see by the apps here, we can sort by date and time so that everything would just be organized chronologically. We'll take a look at how we can do that here in a second, a little bit different, but this way, everything is communication, whether sender or recipient, between Isaac and Elliot, and we can get an idea regardless of the application, right? Who cares what app they were talking to them on? Let's just view this individual, okay? When we timeline that out, we can see key gaps up here. And this is the one thing I like about timelines. I'm more of a use timelines for reporting, less about analysis. But the one place in analysis that I do like timelines is the quick look for patterns, right? Hence, timelines. But you can see here there's a large gap. All right. And we've got some other gaps here, another gap here. Well, coming out of the kind of breaking the fourth wall type thing. This is because when we would build data sets and stuff, we would, you just buy a temporary plan and whatever. But what kind of patterns can you see? Well, in this case, if it was a burner phone, you can see that I am buying plans, and hey, just had to re-up the phone. Hopefully you get this. I'm going to limit it to certain dates so that I only see certain things. But then I can zero in here, and we get another thing here. Yo, it's Elliot. You still have the same number. And you can see it's happening a few times because we have these date times. That actually should have, I messed up the slide order, but we're analyzing that pattern here because, hey, at the start of the timeline, they're like, hey, I just got this phone. I re-upped the plan. Like, hey, let's restart this communication. Now, hey, the implication here is that, do you still have the same phone number? Yes, I do. Okay. And the reason these appear multiple times on this timeline again is because there's different timestamps associated with them. Again, if we come up here, I actually removed created time because I didn't care about that, and it should have been filtered down, but I'm going in the wrong order. So what patterns are we seeing? And this is regardless of app. Okay. Are there calls, emails, chats? Whatever the case may be, we want to look at them as an individual, not as an app. Okay. And we select those so that we can look at them later. And so what we have is these are all the chats that happened in spring or whatever, and we can analyze this later on. What we're going to do is we're going to assign this out to a reviewer. Hey, I'm the admin in the lab. I've got this phone in, and I've narrowed it down to the place that needs to be investigated, needs to be analyzed, that sort of thing. And so then I'm going to send it out to someone else for review. And we'll come back to that concept a little later. But yeah, the idea here, get out of just looking at it per app, like, oh, I'm going to analyze the SMS. I'm going to analyze the WhatsApp. I'm going to do that. Let's look at it by individual and really bring it down so that you're getting to all the communication patterns, not just the narrow band that you're looking at. Okay, and we can see the information. Now, as we go through, notice this one was yellow because it was one app, and then we're into a different app, but we're looking at them all the same. Remember this picture, we're going to come back to it later. And if you don't remember the picture, that's okay. It doesn't matter because we're going to come back to it later. So, doesn't matter. Okay. All right. So let's spend some time on biomes. All right. So we've kind of got our chat history. We're going to review it later. Okay. We've got what was going on with that individual in the spring, in the early summer, whatever. And sure, we've got the communication, but maybe we need to know more about, okay, what were they doing on their phone? What was happening? What were they interacting with outside of the chats? That sort of thing. You kind of want to build this person's day to day. Well, biomes are not new. Okay. I guess what you consider new. They've been around for a while, really started to come on the scene a few years ago, like two years ago, and really started to split information with the Knowledge C database, which has been around for a while, storing a lot of good information. So biomes store information about the system and activity, and by extension, that means the user activity. And we're going to look at a bunch of examples of different information that you can get out of the biomes here. But basically, I think, yeah. So the Knowledge C is a SQLite database, and therefore it makes it, I'm going to say relatively easier to interact with Knowledge C. So many of you probably have really good grasp on how to go through that database, even if it's just clicking through and find the information. We can see some of the information that has been stored on this for some time. And some of this information is going to be shared between the two, but you have like data usage and call service information, intent information, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. All this sort of stuff, payment cards, power log, application usage, activity, all this sort of stuff. Okay. Biomes are these binary files, basically, segbs, and they are not as fun to look at. So fortunately, forensic software, pretty much most of them, I don't know, the ones I've seen, parse these out or a lot of these out and present that to the user so that you don't have to dig into that. However, there is documentation out there to get into the hex and break them down if you really want to validate that information. This is not that presentation, but there is a lot of good information out there on how the structure of biomes are actually done. So why biomes? What's their purpose? So that, as it says at the bottom, they work with Siri and other deep look applications such as shortcuts in iOS to provide information to those systems and thereby extension to the user about what is happening. Okay, so Siri needs to be able to interact, send messages, read messages, maps, all this sort of stuff. As far as like direct user information, it needs to know what's happening on the device as far as like you notice here, device orientation. Is it in landscape or is it vertical? Okay. And why might you care about landscape? Well, if I'm interacting with a video, how am I going to display the notification? Is it going to come from the left or is it going to come from the right? So Siri needs to know that. You as an investigator might want to know, hey, were they watching a video? Were they filming or camera? So you can combine the orientation with other things like there was camera state over here. Okay. Those little things to where, like I said, that's why I called it like the Tolkien of the story of the device. Is you have your chats, which is kind of like the dialogue or whatever, the actual stuff, the action that you're paying attention to. But do you want to build up the user behavior, the user activity of what was happening on this phone? Tons of information. We're not going to go over all this, but you can see just the massive list of things that can be extracted off of these devices and be used to define and to describe what is going on around it. Okay. I did stumble across like a blog or something that said when they first saw biomes, they thought of biometrics and they thought that's what it belong to, which is interesting because that never crossed my mind the first time I heard of biomes a while back. And this will be weird, but I guess my Minecraft days of playing Minecraft, when I thought of, a biome is like the nature biome. It's like a type of area. It's a location. And so that's the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, hey, iOS is storing things in their own little nature type locations that are specific to that. That's closer to what it is. And so it's like, oh, hey, Minecraft set me on the right path for understanding a new, at the time, artifact in iOS. Okay. These things are constantly, I don't constantly, but within the realm of computers, constantly changing, and information is moving from knowledge C to biomes and different things because these for Siri and these like iOS shortcuts and stuff are easier to manage and lower level and typically obfuscated from the user. So that's always good. And just as a kind of aside, shortcuts are the ability for third parties to interact with Siri-like automation. So this is not just first party necessarily. Third parties can enable the ability to connect to this type of information in order to perform certain tasks that the app wants to do. Okay, so because of that, we're going to get a lot of good information out of it. So let's take a look at some examples. In this case, we're looking at battery percentage. Okay, it's kind of funny how it just literally records every percentage drop in the phone. but that has to be displayed to the user. It can also be for logs. If something like with updates and different things, it needs to be a certain percentage. It needs to be able to queue that. So anyway, it's stored here, and we can see that, you know, the battery charge is up here at the top. It's going down. They're using up their battery. Okay, but at about this time in here, we'll narrow that down here in a second. It's plugged in. Okay, I went one too far. No, I didn't. I went one too far up with this arrow, but you get the idea. Right in here, actually, it was plugged in, but here we have the percentage up. Okay, so it's plugged in up here and the percentage up here, and so we have application start time. Okay, app interaction start time. Sorry, slipped up on my words. 6:38. So we actually still dropped 1%, just kind of in this gap here. At least we recorded it, and then it bumped up and started charging because we had plugged it in. All right. And then we watched the charge come back up. So combining battery percentage and I've cropped it off, but let's go back up one slide. We have device plugin right here. Okay, we can get an idea of, hey, was the device plugged in? Okay. And then you're going to use other information, or could use other information with location. Were they at home? Were they in a car? Whatever the case may be, traveling. Okay, so the phone was plugged in here locally. Okay, but that's pretty cool. So let's combine that with application launch and interaction or focus time. Okay, is the app in focus? So at about 5:40 p.m., they have the com.apple.poster board. And one thing, like the apps at the system level are going to be named in reverse domain name format. So like this. And then we'd have to look up, okay, what is this app? What is its real name? Okay. Or its useful name. Okay. So at this time, the app was launched or began to be interacted with. Okay. And we can see app interaction time change here as we actually get the app open at 5:42 or reopen it at 5:42. And we have a write time of these things. And so we can see, hey, the app was actually in focus at this time, meaning that the system was prioritizing it on the screen or in its processing, and it's right there, okay, with its time. So we've got our charging. Hey, they're plugged in at this time. Hey, they're interacting with these apps, or the device is looking at these apps. So you can see com.apple.preferences is hitting off here in the next time down here with com.apple.preferences. Okay, and the associated times. And this is a small example, but you could go through and be like, okay, they interacted with this app, then they moved to this app, then they moved to this app. They were in this app for maybe this long, that sort of thing. Okay, it was in focus for this long, that sort of thing. So you're kind of building up that narrative as it goes of what the user was doing while they were chatting. If you needed to, like, hey, we're going to line out their whole day. This is what they did the whole day. Okay. Like if an event happened outside of the device, like you're working a homicide in law enforcement, or you're working something where they were exfilling data, like, hey, they were on their phone, and then during the time that they were doing whatever it was, there was no activity on the phone, and then, you know, back to it. They looked at map data, and we'll take a look at that sort of stuff. Okay. All right. So let's switch over to look at a few more things. I just got sick of like taking screenshots. And so I was like, forget it. We're just going to jump in and take a look. Hopefully, I can't tell on my little preview, but hopefully that's okay and not too tiny. But let me know, and we can adjust the screen size if necessary. So we have things like application and focus, which we just talked about. But let's talk about application. Oh, we have application install. That could be good. Hey, when did they have that install? And artifacts can sit around for a while. Okay. Hey, maybe I installed it, then I uninstalled it. So when you do a dump of app data, you don't get like any chats or whatever because those are gone. But you could see, hey, they had WhatsApp installed at one time because this is hanging around. Now, Biome data is not permanent. Okay. Anywhere from a month or less, probably. Can be. So time matters as far as this. It can last a little longer, but just depending on user activity and stuff like that, the data is going to be cycling pretty quick. It just depends, but it's not forever data. So just a heads up on that. So application install. Then you have application intent. And application intent's kind of interesting because it's the direct hook into various application services for Siri and for other AI, whatever, assistant services, shortcuts, that sort of thing. And the cool thing about this is kind of a more robust setup. They used to have, it probably still is, but I don't think it's as helpful as it used to be. Like the Spotlight database used to hold some of this stuff. And there was a couple other databases that would kind of hold some of these tidbits of information. Well, the intent biome, you can see it's hooked into mobile SMS and WhatsApp and Signal. Hey, that's cool. Call service. So it's all these different things that the user would interact with that Siri might also have to interact with. And so if we click on one at random here, we can get things like, got it, thanks. Here's the message. And we can see contact information associated with that and start time and various things that these biomes are capturing that can help add stuff. Like what if they deleted the message in the app? You could get something here. Okay. Possible residuals before the biomes clear it out as well. But again, what you do in the app doesn't necessarily sync across instantly or even sometimes eventually to these, so we have Signal. I don't know. I haven't clicked on this one, but you have various things. I was going to say, if you could actually see the message in here, that'd be wild. But you can see who the contacts were in here that they were talking to. Okay. And you can see that, hey, they were talking with Signal. Is it in the install? So now, hey, they have Signal installed, or do they? Whatever. You may not be able to get the content, but now you know what apps they're using to communicate. So you have call service information. So again, the intent, application intent, can hold a lot of good information about what is happening. Communication records, interactions between Siri and these types of things. Okay. And so like you see here, we can get like conversation data for our project. It's with those WhatsApp. There we go. We can see the contacts here in WhatsApp because they've started protecting their stuff. But who were they talking to? When were they talking to them? Okay. Do you still have that message? What can you do with that? Okay. So application intent's a good one. Application launch, we talked about. Okay. You can see when the backlight and screen backlight states are up. Okay. Usually that's an indication of activity on the device, even if it's just tapping to check the screen or whatever. Things have turned on. Things are whatever. We have the device orientation we can select here really quick. Again, if you wanted to build the small details of what's going on in your device. So you got portrait, and you can see them switching back and forth, and you have the recorded time here for when was the device being held upright, when were they looking at it in landscape, that sort of thing. Okay. It's recording the switching of that. Now, again, if you're trying to say, hey, when it's landscape, they also had booted, I'm just YouTube. So they were watching a video at this time, then they clicked at portrait, but those types of things. Again, you're building those small pieces of information that's associated with the data to build up that narrative, build up that thing. So if they're like, no, I wasn't on my phone at that time, and you're like, well, look at all of this data. You were flipping your phone, up and down. Your backlight was coming on and off. Applications were coming in and out of focus. That sort of thing. Your battery percentage was dropping at a higher rate. Those types of things. Okay. Even if they don't necessarily interact with something that's going to create like a chat record or a call record or a browser notification, that sort of thing, you can show use or activity on that device to maybe get them to give you more information. Okay, we have like notifications. Sorry, it's like thinking about something. I need to get rid of, I had this little AI plugin that I was experimenting with because of course we are. And with that came some issues with my browser, and I got to uninstall it and I keep forgetting. So what notifications have they got from what apps? So I like this as well. While there's not much conversation or whatever in it, you just kind of get a notification. There's no whatever necessarily. You do get the fact that, hey, there's a notification from, Abe Rudder or whatever, this number and fields and different information of what's happening. Like, hey, I don't know an Abe or an Ed. Okay, could be spam, but that's a lot of spam from one person across two different apps. Okay. So it can help articulate what is happening on a device and who, alibi makers and alibi breakers. But we can see Facebook and claim your reward now from this yellow app. And we can see phone calls, unknown caller, foreign number though, Facebook watch, all sorts of stuff in here. Okay. So a lot of data that we can get out of this notification screen here. Okay. And then Wi-Fi information is Wi-Fi information. Okay. And here's the thing with the Biome data, it contains a lot of good information. Of course, that's why we're talking about it. But that doesn't mean like everything is leaving everywhere else, that there's nowhere else to find this information. You still have Knowledge C that does hold things. You still have your plist files out there that are going to hold configurations, that are going to hold information for various things like Wi-Fi information and all that sort of stuff. Like if we were to click on this, we're tracking Wi-Fi connection or pings off of towers, but we don't really have much information. Okay. There's a plist file out there that will contain a lot more information associated with Wi-Fi. But again, this is just more data to help you build out that information. Okay. So as far as biome data that we're going to talk about just today, here's a list of some of the things that you can find. This is not a comprehensive list because of course it's going to be device specific, right? What you have on there, what has been recorded. So for example, if they've never connected to Bluetooth information or CarPlay or that sort of thing, you're not going to see that information in the biome. Okay. If you don't have mobile stuff. But again, that even though biomes contain a wealth of information, there's still stuff everywhere else. It hasn't been like a mass migration to just pure biome data. So if we were to expand Knowledge C, we still have a lot of information here, and we're parsing out information from a bunch of other places. So don't get stuck in just the biomes, even though they're super cool and hold a lot of kind of that background information. You want to go out and get it. But biomes are super cool. They've been around for a while, but really started coming on the scene in iOS 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. They're probably not going around for a while. Okay. So yeah, be sure you're familiar with those or at least looking in those if you need to build out a lot more of that data. I know some cases It's just like, hey, show me the conversations, show me the pictures, show me whatever, and get out. But if it's one of those cases where you really need to build the narrative, build the story of, what has happened on that device, biome data can be a big one. Okay, so let's go back here. All right, so now we've looked at the chats for Elliot, and we've gone through and we've looked at the phone, and we've started to build, we went through the biome data. And so we have like, hey, this is when they were using the device, and this is when they were interacting with it, and all that sort of stuff, right? And we've kind of started building that out. And now we need to kick it over, the chats over to a reviewer. All right. So what we want to do is be able to pull out information that is privileged or protected or whatever the case may be, right? We don't want them to be able to see that because, it worked out well in other cases where they didn't take that and then they lost the case. And by worked out well, I mean not at all. So we have a message here. All right. This picture of this car, whatever. I just picked one at random, and we want to mark this as privileged or private information that they can't see. So what we can do is flag it as privileged, okay, in there. And since I'm logged in as an admin, it just puts the check mark there. Hey, we hit apply, we hit apply and it's good to go. All right. Okay. It's marked as privileged. Now I'm an admin. I can see everything in the case. No problem. Just go from there. So then my reviewer comes along and logs into the system, sees the case, logs in. And what they have here is they don't see anything other than flagged as privileged. So they know that there was a message there or some messages there, but they don't have any idea of the context or anything like that. It's just gone because that information is not something that they should see. Okay. And this is super important because I think more and more we're starting to deal with cases, especially in the federal environment. If you investigate cases there, where you kind of have in the federal space, I know if anybody are in here, it's kind of a quasi, like you mix the disciplines of corporate and law enforcement. You're basically doing corporate investigations, but you have a gun and the power to arrest people sometimes, depending on your agency. And so you can come across information, maybe, hey, they're talking about stuff that is mission critical to the agency in other places. Okay. So yes, you could bring out the chats in that, but now you're going to have to ship them out, create another thing, a portable case or something, and send it out. And that can be an issue as well. And disjointed, this keeps the flow, but they still can't see that information, and you don't have information moving around. Okay. So super important to do that. Okay. To be able to mark things as privileged and still have the power of the reviewers out there so that you can distribute that workflow. One of the things that brought this up actually was I was talking with a commander of a unit out in California, and we were talking about various things, and they said, oh, hey, yeah, we can't have the same person who investigates it look at the evidence, or the case investigator can't be the one that's also looking at the digital evidence, because the way that they were interpreting, the way that their policies were written, that presents a possible privacy rights violation, because they may see stuff that's outside of the scope of the warrant, but because they're the lead case investigator, that's going to taint them because they're also working with these people in this organization and those people here, or in a street level investigation, the same idea. They might be, oh, I know that person and they weren't under investigation, but now I know they've been interacting with this thing. And while, plain view and all that sort of stuff, we're not going to get into that legal discussion. But the idea with this department was they needed that separation. The issue with that, which we've all been working that way for a long time, or maybe you do it all yourself. But the issue with that is that bogs down the investigation as well, because the person in the lab doesn't necessarily know as much about the case as as the investigator on the street does. That was my situation, at BCI, where people would bring information to me, and I had the reports and I had the warrants and I had the affidavit and I had all that sort of stuff. But it's still, I didn't know the area. I didn't know the people. I didn't know the cases, that sort of thing. So I would do my best, send it back to them. And then they would come back and we'd be this back and forth. But if I can get the evidence narrowed down to just the individual that is associated with the case easily within, hey, remember, we're not focusing on the app, we're focusing on the individual, regardless of the communication, and then create the case so that stuff that they shouldn't see is removed, then I can hand the case back to them. They can work it knowing safely that they're not going to, or at least we've minimized the chances of violating privacy rights or anything like that. But I can now move on to the next case. Okay. I don't have to read the chats. If I'm the forensic guy, I can focus on deeper dive forensic stuff, solving problems for other reviewers, creating cases and doing that sort of thing and distributing them out, while the people who know the most about the case are able to review the data while still being able to maintain a balance with that privacy standard. So, questions? I don't know. Oh, we do have one Q&A here. All of this requires FFS, or does that mean FTK? Or when the text is deleted from the app, does every app delete the intent record, or is it app by app? It's app by app, and it's also the cycle of the application intent. Oh, yes, full file system. Yes, Carter, that is correct. Sorry, my head was in a whole different place. Yes. So will the change be reflected in the biome when a message is deleted? So it depends on app by app, and it depends on how often the biome is scrubbing its records. And even then, a lot of times it'll put it into a little tombstone file, a little kind of like cache holding deleted file, kind of to reserve that space for a bit so you can find it. But it totally depends on that sort of thing, okay, on the app by app. So you can get information that will lag behind a little bit, just depends. So is the software you're using in the presentation a mobile device specific version of FTK? No, this is just FTK. So this is FTK 8.1 in the screenshots. And again, we're using FTK 8.1 in this because that's the software I have available to me. So we showed it in here, but I'm trying to, workflow and focusing on that. But this is FTK 8.1. We don't have a mobile specific. And just on that topic, and I know this isn't the thing, but we do not do mobile extraction. So to kind of tying into Carter's comment or question, does this require a full file system? Yes. So I believe these full file system images were from Celebrite, and we can ingest Celebrite output into the system, but it was a full file system out of a Celebrite. So we can bring in Celebrite, Gray Key, Oxygen, Soon, XRY, all the kind of the big ones there. But this information does require that full file system, because to that, you're not going to get this with like an Apple backup or a logical extraction that's just querying databases. It's that lower level of information, because you know how Apple is. Let me go back up a little bit. Where's my mouse? You know how Apple is with their privacy stuff. Let me keep going. This sort of stuff is I mean, like privacy, whatever, but it's a lot of detailed information about the user's activity and that sort of stuff. So it's going to be protected at that lower level. Okay. So yeah. And so always a benefit with the full file system dump is you're going to get that more information. So hopefully the support continues to run. I can't speak for that. We don't do mobile extraction. So hopefully the companies out there that are doing it and excelling at it continue to give us this low level pull, because the amount of data that we are able to pull from this is awesome. Okay. And so, and again, it's that low level narrative building. And I know that you're not going to build that level of story for every single case, especially for situations where time is critical. Like, hey, we just need actionable intel and move forward. You're not going to do that necessarily, at least not at first. Maybe you'll come back and do it when the case, when maybe, you know, you have an arrest or you've stopped the breach in a corporate network or whatever, you know, you figured out who's leaking the data, that sort of thing. But if it's a case where, hey, it's a capital case, or you're going to be firing an executive or something on the corporate side, and you need to have everything, the Biome data is where it's going to come in, and you're going to be able to build that robust network, especially for corporate with this division of work and being able to hide things as privileged. Or if you're investigating a corporate, a healthcare, a lawyer's office, this being able to work with PPI, privileged personal information or private personal information, that sort of thing. You want to have some workflow within your organization that you can do that. Okay. Because you just don't want to mess up a case in that space. And yeah, it's always a hassle when you go into those places, because you're like, oh man, we're going to create this massive image and we got to go through and just pull out this certain data. But with mobile phones, slightly smaller data size, but I think that's a misnomer, because chats don't take up a lot of room, as you guys know. And so even on, you know, you think, oh, this image is only 100 gig or something. Well, 100 gig of chats, call history, and whatever else is, I mean, you got photos in there, but that's a lot of data to dig through. Okay. So we're about 3 minutes earlier than I normally, whatever, but any other questions? I got some chat, I think, over here. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of a quick and light overview of Biome data workflows associated with building that story that's within the mobile device. Take it from the individual, not the app. You can build the story with the foundation of the Biome data, knowledge scene, of course, a whole bunch of other stuff. We focused on biomes today. And then if, you know, being able to deliver that, that out for privileged information. So, one other thing I want to plug, though, honestly, is we have a monthly series called Forensic Fundamentals, and we just started last month. And the way that we're approaching it is just the core forensic principles. Like last week, honestly, we just talked about what is digital forensics, what is collection, preservation, analysis, review, those types of things. But we're really focusing on how do you, as the investigator, articulate what those things are to non-tech people, or if you were to write a report, how would you define those terms and go and that sort of thing. Okay. So it's all about communication while simultaneously learning the core concepts. We have another one this month, I think in 2 weeks or something, hence the monthly. That's typically how it goes. And we're going to be talking about hardware aspects of forensics. How do you talk about how write blockers work and how the computers process the data? And then I can't remember if it's in this upcoming one, because I'm a co-presenter. But in the next month, we're getting into the bits and the bytes and how do we articulate that and how do we work with that data. So again, low-level stuff, but really focusing on the articulation of those concepts. Okay, so you should check out with that. We're building a document together as we type out those definitions. We have it up on the screen. Last time we had a bunch of comments and a bunch of input from a lot of different people. We take your stuff, we build it as a group. Okay. And it's really this fun collaborative kind of, I think, different format of a webinar. So come in, participate, and build the document together. We'll be posting the document that we did in the first episode, first month, in the handout, so you can download it when you join, so you're never behind. Or if you miss a week, you can always just download the new one and update. So, or miss a month, I guess. So yeah, highly recommend that. So, all right. So thanks. If you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, please do so. A lot of great information being shared out there, and I share a lot of other stuff. So thanks for tuning in, and be safe out there.